kingdom of Arathor is flourishing, emerging triumphant from the last war, and now with access to magic for the first time. The last civilization that gained access to magic let it consume them, and the entire world in unforgettable terror. We shall see whether history is doomed to repeat itself. Don't forget to like and subscribe and come as we discover Dalaran and Dwarves. Post-war Arathor was a wondrous and prosperous place to live. The wealth, power and safety that this empire had cannot be understated. The human magi who were first trained in magic would go out into the world, use it to help them hunt and protect their people in an ever-expansion. But their knowledge of the arcane arts was only just beginning. As they grew in knowledge and power, so did their thirst for its secrets. They began to gather in one place, a new city that was formed to the west of the then capital of Strom. They called it Dalaran, and it became the central point of all human study into the mystical arts. To the great Lordamer Lake, this new city would expand rapidly. The mages would use their magic to erect high, spiraling towers to house their ever-growing library of magical knowledge. Many of the peasantry would also flock to reside within the city walls. Many of them enjoyed the safety that the mages brought to the streets. Slowly but surely, the greatest wizards founded a magocracy, becoming the ruling class of the city. They devoted themselves wholly to their studies and would eventually become so out of touch with the outside world. As their influence and power grew, so did their boldness. They would eventually declare their independence from the kingdom of Arathor and announce themselves as a new city-state. While magic brought security to its citizens, the spell-weaving had begun to take its toll on the city proper. Reality had begun to warp and bend dangerously, and most troubling of all, reports began to flood in of strange demonic creatures that would terrorize their people, only to vanish into the night. Upon hearing this, the Magi of Silvermoon dispatched their greatest sorcerers to investigate. The elves knew this day would come, that one day they could no longer hide their magic from the Burning Legion. But the humans were reckless in their pursuit of knowledge, just like the highborn from before the shattering of the world. They decided to gather the elite human magi to a secret council and tell them the truth. They told them all about the War of the Ancients, how the world was almost lost to the Fellfires completely, that if they continued down this road, they would damn all to its fate. The humans and elves had once more found common purpose in this enemy, and they resolved to solve this dilemma together. They agreed they needed to hunt these demons, the ones that were already here, to forestall any future encroachment. To this end, the united mages of both human and elf would form what would come to be known as the Council of Tirisfal. They devised an intriguing plan. They would each channel their considerable power into one mortal who would fight the demons in their stead. This mortal would be named the Spearhead, and with so much power coursing through them, the demons' defeat was inevitable. While this seemed to work flawlessly, the council had to remain nearby in order to channel their magic into the spear. It often left them vulnerable. Despite the flaw, they continued this way for some time. The eventual change came from the unlikeliest of places. A half-human, half-elf orphan by the name of Alodai. From a young age he was obsessed with magic, and frost magic in particular, but many never saw in him any real potential. That is, with the exception of the council, who empowered him as the spearhead once he reached adulthood. The risk to the council members, however, was becoming too great. The demons were learning and beginning to exploit this issue, and so Alodai devised a spell that could be performed over great distances. This allowed the now newly named Guardian of Tirisfal to battle the demons wherever they would show themselves, while the council could remain hidden and safe. The spellwork itself was based upon the expert knowledge of one of the council members named Merrill Winterstorm. The power of the magi could be channeled into an ancient arcane artifact now known as the Forge of the Guardian, and from there it would be imbued into said chosen guardian, until such a time as they would relinquish the power for the next guardian to take over. While the guardian was singularly powerful, they could not be in all places at once, so they formed the Tirisfal Guard. Those would be the elite magi guard of the magocracy, the ones of Dalaran. Rather than being empowered by the council, they would wield impressive magical artifacts that were either found or created to battle the demonic forces. Each guardian was to spend 100 years empowered by the magic. In this time, they were to take an apprentice and pass along the knowledge they acquired over their lifetime, and then the empowerment itself once their time was spent. It went on this way successfully for many, many years to come. While all of this is taking place, unbeknownst to the humans or elves, a second awakening was beginning to take place. Deep beneath the surface of the world, the earthen, once held in stasis in the Titan facility of Uldaman, had begun to stir. No longer stone but flesh, and with little understanding of what had happened in the nearly 8,000 years they remained forgotten. While they looked different from what they once did, the call of the deep places was still omnipresent. Much like the gnomes in the ages prior, they left behind the Titan city that held them in slumber and spread westward. They eventually tunneled towards a huge mountain range and reached the heart of the tallest peak. They named the mountain Kazmodan and constructed a giant forge at its center. Their fascination with shaping earth, metal and gems ensured that the location would thrive. From this central point they began to mine the surrounding region of its treasures. As more and more dwarves populated this area, a city grew in its place. They named it Ironforge. They began to interact more and more with the surface world too. Beyond the great gates of the city lay the land of Dun Moreau. It was here they met two other races. The first were the gnomes, friendly and ingenious. Both races would sense a natural kinship and quickly build solid relations. The gnomes' technical prowess and the dwarves' masterful skill at shaping earth, they helped them build for themselves their own underground city, which they named Nomoragan. The other race was not quite so friendly. Dun Moreau was infested by tribes of highly aggressive and territorial ice trolls, ones that had adapted to living in the icy wastes. They spared no time in allying with the gnomes and claiming the land by force, eventually conquering it for themselves, and despite occasional incursion, for all time to come. The closeness of these two people, the dwarves and the gnomes, could not be understated. Despite them having two separate cities, they were themselves inseparable. So much so that many of the other races would consider dwarf and gnome to be one and the same. It was together these races surveyed much of their new world. The entire continent of Azeroth, what we now call the Eastern Kingdoms, was explored. Through this exploration, they discovered the other races thriving to the north. First the humans and their allies, the High Elves. They bonded quickly with the human forces over a shared love of stories and battle, and the first stirrings of a lasting friendship were born. The humans also taught the dwarves of the light. They were enthralled by the teachings, especially those of Tyr, who showed that one sacrifice could be the difference between life and destruction. They respected how the teachings of the Holy Light were steeped in tradition, and would quickly build up their own following amongst the dwarven people. The world, it seems so hopeful now. People are uniting with common purpose. But since this is Azeroth, we know this is merely the quiet before the storm. but that is for future episodes. For now, thank you so much to everyone for every bit of support, and don't forget to come back anytime.